Kính thưa quý vị và các bạn, người gốc Việt cũng là dân tị nạn sang Hoa Kỳ. Nhưng 45 năm qua chưa thấy có sĩ phu nào nói như người con của thế hệ thứ hai của CUBA, Marco Rubio. Vì sao? Có lẽ nhiều vị có khả năng, nhưng chỉ vì chọn đứng dưới mái nhà không thích hợp, mà bây giờ không thể nào nói được những câu có tư tưởng sâu sắc như Rubio. Đáng buồn thay, những gì Marco Rubio nói không khác những gì mà chúng ta đã nói trong nhiều bài trước đây. Càng hiểu những gì đang diễn ra ở Hoa Kỳ thì càng thấy nhà chí sĩ Donald Trump càng đúng. Cùng với chuyện thanh tra bầu cử, tháng 7 âm lịch, mùa thu sắp đến, Hoa Kỳ chắc có nhiều chuyện đến tất phải đến. Bây giờ thì xin ghi lại phiên bản tiếng Việt bài hùng biện của Thượng nghị sĩ Cộng hòa Marco Rubio ở Florida, để giúp cho những ai mất cơ hội xem trực tiếp có thể xem lại. Và đây, xin mời.
Mr. President, the world country yesterday watched these images out of Cuba, really unprecedented. In 62 years of communist tyranny on the island of Cuba, we have never seen, there's never been what now is up to 40 cities in which people took to the streets organically, unorganized, grassroots, to ask for the end of that tyranny. And I think it's important for a lot of people that are new to the issue to sort of understand what that means and what it's all about. I think that the first lesson we need to take away from it is that Marxism, socialism, doesn't work. The way socialism, the way Marxism has always worked, the way it's always empowered itself, is it goes to a people and immediately divides them. It says, there is this oppressor class, and then there is this victim class, and these evil oppressors and, capitalists, in the case of socialism or traditional Marxism, they oppress the victims. And what you have to do is you have to give us the power in government to take care of these oppressors, to go after these oppressors. And if you give us that power, we will deliver you security. We will protect you from the oppressors. They ask for security in exchange for freedom. That is always the price that socialism asks for, security. And what you wind up with is a country of people that hate each other, that are angry at each other. A significant portion of the people in the country have to leave, have to flee, go to jail, because they're the oppressor class. Their lives are destroyed. Their family lives are destroyed. But the socialism can't deliver the security. And when it can't deliver the security, you don't get your freedom back. And in fact, when you start to complain about that, that is when the repression comes. Well, that's what's happened in Cuba. Socialism and Marxism has done in Cuba what it has done everywhere in the world that it's been tried. It has failed. It has failed. They gave up their freedom, or they were told, give up your freedom in exchange for a world-class healthcare system. It's not a world-class healthcare system. In fact, it's a healthcare system that does not even have the ability to deal with COVID at its very basic level. That says, give up your freedom for economic security. What economic security? People are hungry, homes are crumbling. There is no economy. There is no real economy in Cuba. Give up your freedom and you'll have an education, free education for everybody. That education, number one, you're a doctor. You can drive a taxi cab in Cuba and make more money. Or number two, you get forced to go overseas and work basically on slave wages, no pay, barely any pay at all. It's basically human trafficking, as our own Department of State found when it looked at the Cuban doctors program and how it's been abused. And so what's happened in Cuba is socialism has failed. It has to repress the people who complain about it. You don't get your freedom back. And like socialists always do, they have to find someone to blame. And who do they blame? Number one, they blame anybody in the country that doesn't agree with them. You're immediately a counter-revolutionary. You're immediately a pawn of the imperialists. And then, of course, they always blame the United States. The problem in Cuba for the regime is the people aren't falling for those lies anymore. They're not. The embargo, that's the first thing they blame. It's the embargo. The embargo is causing all this. Why aren't fishermen and farmers in Cuba allowed to fish or grow things and sell it to people. It's not the embargo that keeps them from doing that. It's the regime. Why can't Cubans own a small business? Why can't a Cuban do in Cuba what they can do in Miami, what they can do in Washington, what they do in countries all over the world? They can't do it in Cuba. They can't open a small business. That's not the embargo that keeps them from doing it. In fact, U.S. law allows us to trade and to do commerce with small businesses that are independently owned by Cubans. You know why Cubans can't own small businesses? It's not the embargo. It's not the U.S. It's the regime that doesn't allow it. People see these lies. How can they afford to build luxury, four-star, world-class hotels for tourists, but they cannot afford to deal with the crumbling homes that Cubans are living in, with roofs literally falling in over their head, with water leaking into operating rooms at hospitals? Look what they do with the money. Oh, it's because you don't allow more money to be sent. When an American or Cuban American sends money to their family members in Cuba in the past through Western Union, the regime takes 10% off the top, and then they take those dollars you sent, they force the Cubans to convert it into a worthless Cuban currency. They keep the dollars, and then guess what? If you want to buy anything, you got to buy it from a government store, and guess what the government store sells things for? Dollars. That's not the embargo, that's the Cuban regime that does that. And who is it that's putting people in jail? Gets your head cracked open, gets your door kicked down in the middle of the night. There are 80 people missing today, at least 80 people. Disappeared overnight, their family doesn't know where they are. That's not the embargo that's jailing people, that's the regime. And that's what I tell people. You can open up all you want. We can pass a bill here that says, open to Cuba, 100% open. You can do whatever you want, full free trade, you can do whatever you want. At the end of the day, the Cuban regime will control that opening. It's not just what we want to do, it's what they want to do. You want to do tourism? We tried that in 2015 when the Obama changes. And you know what they did? They said, thank you. We love the fact you're coming here as tourism. Guess what? All the tourist sites are owned by a holding company named Gaesa, controlled by the Cuban military. So everything comes through our hands. You want to send them food? That's great. Guess who gets it? Alimport, which is a government, military-owned agriculture company. You can't sell it to a small grocery store in Cuba or even a food wholesaler. It goes to the Cuban government. You want to send money? They take it. You know why? Because socialism is about control. And all of these things, tourism, food, money, medicine, it's all about control. You want humanitarian aid? Let's get Red Cross. Any of these vetted NGOs in the world should be allowed to go into Cuba. They won't allow it. A, because it's embarrassing to them. They have a world-class healthcare system. Why do they need humanitarian aid? But B, because they want to control it. Send them vaccines. But if you put it in their hands, the government, the regime, guess who gets the vaccines? The people who behave. First the regime elites, then the people who behave. If you're not behaving, if you're not going along with what they want you to do, you don't get a vaccine. They will use any opening as a tool, as a weapon against their people, because that's what socialism does. That's what these Marxists do in Cuba. They will use anything as a weapon against the people of Cuba. What can we do is what people want to know. Number one, I hope that we will all be clear about whose side we're on. You don't have to even agree with anything I've said. What you should agree with is that people everywhere in the world, including 90 miles from our shore, should be allowed to go into the street, peacefully march, call for an end to dictatorship, and not have their head cracked open. By the way, no one in Cuba has guns except the military, so why are these repressive forces walking around with these rifles and people getting shot? They're shooting people that literally are unarmed. Should be able to do that, and we should be clear. We should be clear in our language. We don't just condemn this tyranny, we condemn this communist, this Marxist, this socialist tyranny. Call it for what it is. Number two, we should make clear nothing's going to change. There's not going to be any sanctions change as a result of this. On the contrary, I hope the Biden administration will now announce they have finished their review of Cuba policy and everything that's in place is staying in place. To the extent we change policy, number three, I hope we make it a top priority to allow the people of Cuba to have free, unfettered, and open internet access. And the technology exists to do that with a satellite-based system. We should put the best minds to work on getting that done, because if the Cuban people have free and unfettered access to the internet, the first thing the regime shut down yesterday was the internet. They can communicate with each other, and they can receive information and communicate with the world. It's 90 miles from our shores. We should be allowed to do that. Number four, for all of those who believe and have faith in the international community, and I still hold hope that one day it will work again, where's Spain? Where's the EU? Where are all these countries that for years have given cover and protection to the Cuban regime and condemned America? They should speak out clearly that what's happening there is wrong, that repression is wrong. We should rally that. We should use our position of strength and power in the world and our influence in diplomatic circles to make that happen. And number 5, I hope the president will be very clear with the regime in Cuba that we will not tolerate them encouraging a mass migration event, because I'm warning you, this is what they do. They've done it twice already. Things get bad and they say, look, if you don't lift sanctions, if you don't go back to the Obama-era policies, if you don't get rid of the embargo, it's inevitable. You're going to have 50,000 people take to the ocean and head towards the United States. They've used that against us twice. They did it in '94, they did it in 1980 with the Mario boat lift. And President Biden needs to be clear, whether it's through private channels or saying it publicly, be abundantly clear that we will treat the encouragement of mass migration towards the United States as a hostile action and act accordingly. That cannot be tolerated. I want to close with this. I recognize that most of the members of this chamber, most of the people here in Washington, and frankly, most of the people in the country do not pay attention to Cuba on a daily basis. I get it. I really do. But if you're not following the issue of Cuba, you can be forgiven for not knowing that what we're seeing, what we saw yesterday, what we're seeing today, what's happened recently, none of this was started by politicians. Wasn't started by me. Wasn't started by anybody in Miami or in Florida. Wasn't started by any think tank in Washington. Wasn't even started by political activists inside of Cuba. You know who started what's happening in Cuba? Artists, poets, songwriters, writers, actors, musicians. They're the ones who started it. The San Isidro movement. Because they came after them. And there's a song, a lot of people don't realize that there was a song that came out earlier this year. A song that, by the way, if you play in Cuba, you will go to jail. The song's name is Patria y Vida. Now, the slogan of the Cuban regime is Patria o Muerte, meaning fatherland or death. This song played on that. It says Patria y Vida, which means fatherland and life instead of fatherland or death. And the song is extraordinarily powerful because it was written by people and sang by people who have lived this reality and are living this reality. So powerful that, as I said, you'll go to jail in Cuba if you play it. And what the song basically says in its lyrics is, why can't people think different ways and not be treated as enemies? Why is life so good for party insiders and their families, but there's no food for average Cubans? Seems to be no embargo for the Cuban regime and their family members. Why can you build luxury hotels while our homes are crumbling? Why do Cubans have to suffer the indignities? The indignities of simple things like not being able to bathe with soap, not being able to use deodorant, not having toothpaste. Why do they have to deal with these indignities? And the song also asks, who told the regime that Cuba belongs to them and only them? Shouldn't it belong to all 13 million Cubans? The chorus, I'll read first in English and then I'll translate it in Spanish, because it actually plays on the dominoes. Dominoes is a very popular game played by Cubans, played by everybody, but Cubans in particular. It's a big game there. The chorus reads, se acabó, tu 5-9, yo doble 2, ya se acabó, 60 años, trancado el dominó. And how it translates, it says, it's over. You're 59, meaning 1959, the year the Castro took over, but I have double 2s. And everyone knows that if in the domino game, if at the end of the chain, both dominoes, no one has any dominoes left to put down, the game gets locked. And you count numbers, you count dots, to see who won. So it says, it's over. You're 59, but I have double 2s. It's over. 60 years with the domino game locked up for us. Now, I know this is a very colloquial Cuban way of expressing it, but this is incredibly powerful. People in Cuba understood what that means. And that means that all this ideology, all this stuff they talk about, all these lies of the regime work out really well for them. People don't believe it anymore, and they're not afraid anymore. Meanwhile, their lives are ruined. Young people in Cuba, artists in Cuba, who realize that the only country on this planet where Cubans are not successful is Cuba. And they're tired of it. And we should stand with them. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Hôm nay, Vĩnh Tường xin giới thiệu vài cuốn sách của Vĩnh Tường. Quý vị nào thấy có nhu cầu thì hãy vào webblog có link dưới đây để đặt mua. hoặc là cũng có thể làm quà tặng cho con cháu không chừng. Với nỗi băn khoăn muốn giúp cho lớp trẻ ở giữa hai dòng văn hóa của những gia đình Việt Nam ở khắp các nước tự do, VĩnhTường đã đem những kiến thức về tâm lý giáo dục, những kinh nghiệm trong ngành giáo dục và kinh nghiệm làm cha mẹ, làm ông bà từ Việt Nam đến Hoa Kỳ và tham khảo nhiều sách về giáo dục ở Hoa Kỳ để viết cuốn thứ nhất Giáo dục con cái, cha mẹ là một thiên chức, xuất bản vào năm 2014 tại Hoa Kỳ. Cuốn thứ hai là Lập gia đình. Cuốn này gom góp một số ý kiến về hôn nhân, đồng chủng hoặc là dị chủng, làm suy gia và giá trị gia đình trong xứ sở tự do có quá nhiều nền văn hóa phức tạp như ở Hoa Kỳ. Và cuốn thứ ba là Những cánh chim Hải Âu, giúp cho những thế hệ yêu chuộng tự do mãi không quên nguồn cội của mình. Tuy khả năng có hạn, nhưng hy vọng sẽ giúp ích cho các gia đình trẻ ở các nước tự do và đa chủng. Được bao nhiêu thì tùy ở nhu cầu của quý vị, nhưng có điều chắc chắn nhất là ở nơi đây một tấm lòng dâng hiến. Và việc chuyển ngữ video đến đây xin chấm dứt. Nếu có sai sót không đáng kể thì xin quý vị và các bạn lượng thứ cho. Xin đa tạ. Xin hẹn gặp lại cũng trong chương mục nói chuyện với bình dân kỳ tới trên diễn đàn độc lập. Kính chúc tất cả quý vị và các bạn những ngày vui khỏe và bình an. Rất mong quý vị và các bạn góp một tay bấm vào subscribe ôm màu đỏ phía dưới nếu chưa từng làm. Khi nó trở thành màu xám thì kể như quý vị đã làm xong. Tiếng nói trung thực trong thời đại nhiễu nhương khó tìm chỗ đứng. Quý vị vui lòng bấm like để giúp cho diễn đàn có sức thuyết phục YouTube nhằm tồn tại lâu dài và tiếp tục phục vụ cho quý vị và các bạn mỗi ngày một tốt hơn. Xin tạm biệt. Bye bye.